Hello and welcome to the level 70 dungeon guide for Mhigo. This instance contains 3 bosses, the first of which is taken straight from Final Fantasy VII. This is the Magitek Scorpion. Magitek Scorpion has lots of positional deaths that can occur, with things hitting much harder in here than potentially you might have the gear for to survive. However, it should be simple if you follow these abilities. Ability 1 is Electromagnetic Field. This is just a large scale AoE that takes about a quarter of the health off the targets when it goes off. This just needs to be healed through as there's actually no way to avoid it. Secondly, we have Target Search. This ability once cast moves circles around a room with targets on them that follow players. Simply kite the circles around, making sure not to be in them when they stop still and explode. These circles then stay there burning as patches on the floor to avoid. Another point here is to not take these either in front or behind the boss at any time due to his next ability, Tail Laser. Don't be deceived by Tail Laser's name, both the front and the back are a line AoE from the boss, with only the sides being safe. This attack does incredible amounts of damage and can one-shot very easily. This fight, unsurprisingly, is all about movement with the circles, avoiding standing near the boss's face or rear, and for the healer to make sure everyone is topped up as soon as possible after the electromagnetic field attacks. Other than that, it should fall over very quickly, and we can get on to the next boss. Boss number 2 is Aulus Mal Xena, the mad scientist himself. This guy floats around the room in a flying chair thing, which I personally require as a mount. This boss has a few abilities to be aware of. Firstly, little laser beam drones will appear throughout the fight. These are unattackable, and as soon as Aulus does the order to fire ability, they will spawn circles around the room to avoid. Once those have faded, large overlapping circles will then spawn, where you can stand inside to avoid damage. Aulus will then use his second ability, Magitek Disruptor. This applies a stun to everyone in the room and sucks them into melee range. There's nothing you can do about this. At this point, he uses the ability Mind Jack whilst you're stunned. This, once cast, literally knocks you out of your body and puts you in soul form far away from your body. To finish this phase and to win, we'll need to now avoid the Magitek prototype Deathclaw rads and an array of laser beams, walking very slowly in this soul form back to our body. Once we make it back to our body and stand on it, you'll be pulled back into it and be alive again. Once you regain consciousness, you will then need to take out the ads and then focus back onto the boss. You may also see this mana burst ability go off throughout the fight that he uses. This is unavoidable and just needs to be healed through. The boss will very likely use the ability Order to fire again, and now it's just a case of avoiding the same AoEs from earlier until the boss dies. This shouldn't be too hard considering he has a very small health pool. The first 2 bosses actually have very small health pools because of the last boss being quite a challenge. The last boss then is Xenos Yegalvus himself. Xenos has a multitude of abilities to be aware of. Firstly, the room has red stuff around the outside that you don't want to be pushed into that actually gives you a magic vulnerability debuff, and you cannot use Asuna to remove it. His first ability then is Art of the Swell. This does damage and a knockback. For this reason, you need to make sure you're in melee range of the boss to avoid being pushed into the outer ring of the room. His melee attacks on your tank are especially high between abilities, so make sure you have some cooldowns ready to top everyone up and something on the tank like regen to keep that manageable. His second ability is Art of the Storm. This, as I will demonstrate here, is a circle AoE to move away from his melee range to avoid. Failure to do so puts a 15-second paralyze on you, which again you cannot remove with Asuna, which is quite annoying considering the amount of movement you have to do on this fight. Every time Xenos shouts kill, your tank gets slashed very hard. This is a tell to give the healer warning that the tank is about to get trucked, and also for the tank to think about using something to mitigate it a little, maybe a small cooldown. At around 60% health, Xenos shouts, "Let this moment last forever," and splits into 4 shades around the room, and him in the middle. He then uses his next ability, Vein Splitter. This is a mid-range AoE circle to run out of. Immediately, 4 other circles appear to avoid from each of the shades you saw a moment ago. Not long after this, the boss will tether a line to a player. This player will need to stand away from the others, preferably in a direction with the least amount of ground taken, as Xenos will then use Lightless Spark on them. This is basically a large conal AoE to avoid that was placed in the direction of the tethered player's last standing position. This deals moderate amounts of damage. Past the 50% mark, Xenos starts to use Concentrativity. This is an unavoidable purple explosion that will need to be healed through. He attempts to use this whilst players are low from other abilities, and really marks the last stretch of the fight, where he stacks abilities you have seen before. Then, an Art of the Swell knockback at the same time as the 4 Shades move from earlier, only this time 2 players will be tethered in the direction of the Shades facing. After a few seconds they will do a conal AoE in that direction, so if you get tethered, move away and make the shade you're connected to look towards the outside of the arena. The other 2 shades will drop AoE circles. This is particularly hard to manage and is the real crux of the fight. The only safety area would actually be behind the 2 tethered ads. Not what I do here, because I die in this particular fight. Hero is blown back into the circles, and they are definitely a one-shot ability. At around 18%, the boss will now transition into his last phase. You will see an ether transfer bar on the screen somewhere. The boss will disappear into the center of the room unattackable, and ads will appear around the room. These ads are the boss's swords, which perform the same moves that Xenos was using earlier. The knockbacks from the Swell, the melee range avoid mechanic from the Storm, and one sword you've not seen so far called Ami no Kabakiri. Focus this one first, and then the Swell, and then finally the Storm Sword, making sure to avoid the mechanics when they glow independently. For example, the Swell still knocks you back even if the sword is destroyed at that position. Once these ads are gone, Xenos will blink around the room with his ether he collected. The faster you kill the swords, the less damage this ultimate ability does, because the less ether he collects. Once you survive this, hopefully, and it's just a case of burning the rest of his health. However, he likes to spam Concentrativity here to keep your healer on their toes AoE wise, and it can be a real challenge to keep everyone up with this low gear. Pop the limit break and finish him off as soon as you can. Once he's beaten, you feel really accomplished. Sit back and bask in the following cutscenes, which I won't spoil for you. If this video has been useful, leave me a sub if you want more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.